Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into discussing every single matchup of week number 2, and I'll be telling you guys whether I believe you should start or sit the quarterbacks in every single matchup. But before we could get on into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. And if you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. I would also like to ask that if you guys have any questions that don't even revolve around quarterbacks, you can certainly ask quarterback questions. If you have waiver wire questions, if you have trade questions, if you have running back, quarterback, tight end questions, wide receiver questions, make sure that you ask them down below in the comment section. I love to talk to you guys down there. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 2 quarterback start or sit decisions. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the LA Chargers at the Kansas City Chiefs. And if I'm being honest with you guys, you already knew who to start in this matchup. You're going to be firing up both Justin Herbert, the pervert, as well as Patrick Mahomes. Now, Patrick Mahomes is currently dealing with a minor injury, but it is to his non-throwing hand, so I'm not really worried at all. And I think Patrick Mahomes, even with the minor injury, could easily finish as the #1 quarterback on the week. Same thing goes for Justin Herbert, the pervert. He will be without Keenan Allen in this matchup, but I still expect him to be putting up a very high point total. This game is projected to be one of the highest scoring matchups on the week, and in my opinion, I definitely agree with that. So I definitely like Justin Herbert as well as Patrick Mahomes a ton here on Thursday Night Football. Next up, we begin the Sunday slate with the Miami Dolphins at the Baltimore Ravens. Tua Tagovailoa is going to be a start for me, but he is basically one of the last guys in terms of the starting quarterbacks that I want to actually be playing. You can make an argument that some of the players that I've listed as a sit in today's video, that you might actually want to be starting them ahead of Tua Tagovailoa. And for a lot of those players, I wouldn't even make an argument with you about that. If you have a question about any of these quarterbacks, please make sure that you leave it down below in the comment section. So Tua is a start, but he's not a guy that I'm overwhelmingly confident in. But there is always big game potential for Tua when you have wide receivers like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on your team. For the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson absolutely skull-fucked the Jumbo Jets last week. I expect him to put up a decent point total in this game. He did struggle last year up against the Miami Dolphins, but I do think that he is definitely a start-worthy quarterback this week. Definitely not top 5 in my opinion, but he definitely could be a top 10 guy at the end of the week. Next up, we move to the Jumbo Jets at the Cleveland Browns, and I don't know why the Jets are still rolling out Joe Flacco. Now, it came out this morning that head coach of the Jets, Saleh, is keeping receipts. He's remembering what people are saying about how bad this Jets team is, and he's going to be able to bring it up in the future. Like, haha, look at you, you dumb motherfucker. Why were you laughing at the Jets? Look where we are now. Funny, Saleh. Why are you playing Joe Flacco? Joe Flacco is not that guy. Joe Flacco was atrocious last week up against the Ravens, and the Browns defense might be even more difficult. You might be better off starting Mike White or Strevler, the quarterback that played really well in preseason. I just don't get why they are playing Joe Flacco, and honestly, if this game goes south, I think Flacco is going to get benched. It makes absolutely zero sense to roll Flacco out when you have those quarterbacks that have upside on your team. So, to me, I don't get why they're doing it, but Flacco's going to start. He's definitely a sit. Jacoby Brissett definitely was a little bit better than I thought he was going to be in terms of being an NFL quarterback, but he is far from a start-worthy fantasy football quarterback. Next up, we move to the Washington Commanders at the Detroit Lions, and Jared Goff is one of those players where if you wanted to make the argument, hey, I want to start Goff over Tua, I'm not really going to argue with you. Jared Goff is one of those guys that if my list was a little deeper on players that I would start, then Jared Goff would make it. He's definitely on the fringe of being a starter. He looked pretty decent up against the Philadelphia Eagles last week, and I believe this could be a high-scoring, back-and-forth affair potentially between the Commanders and the Lions. Carson Wentz actually looked good for the first time in what seemed like forever. Last year, he was decent, but that's because the Colts scheme made him look good. I thought that honestly, in Washington, Carson Wentz was going to struggle, but in week number 1, Carson Wentz actually looked pretty solid. He ended up throwing 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards, and 2 interceptions in that matchup. This week, do I think he plays that good again? Probably not, but this could be a higher scoring game, so I definitely think Wentz is a start-worthy quarterback. Next up, we move to the Indianapolis Colts at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, last week, I thought Matt Ryan was going to light it up. The Houston Texans should have stood 0 chance in that game, but there was a lot of coaching errors, and the team just kind of fell flat. Now, they didn't look atrocious, but they didn't win the game. They tied, which pretty surprising. Matt Ryan looked all right. I think up against the Jaguars defense, he can definitely look better. For the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence is one of those guys that I need to see him flash at the NFL level. I feel like last year we saw some bright spots, and the reason why he didn't play so good, I just go ahead and blame that on Urban Meyer. I'll just be like, you know what? Urban Meyer was such an idiot. They switched from Urban Meyer to another head coach. Whatever, just throw his rookie year out of there, right? Don't take anything from that. It is what it is. But Lawrence up against the Washington Commanders didn't look too great last week. Now, while I do really like Christian Kirk in fantasy this week, while I'll be banging the drum for Christian Kirk, that's just because Trevor Lawrence is locked onto him and is going to continue to feed him the ball. I'm just not too sure if Trevor Lawrence is a guy you want to be starting up against the Colts, who I think have a much better defense than what they showed last week up against the Texans. Next up, we move to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the New Orleans Saints. Now, right now, there is a strong narrative towards the fact that Tampa Bay Tom Brady in the regular season sucks absolute donkey peen up against the New Orleans Saints and that he has struggled in the past. Now, that is not going to make me sit Tom Brady. It makes me slightly less confident in Tom Brady, who didn't look amazing up against the Cowboys, but that was a game where on paper you're thinking, oh wow, Tom Brady's going to put up this high-scoring game. Dak is going to be able to go tit for tat with Tom Brady, rock'em sock'em fucking robot style, but that didn't end up happening, and the Bucks rolled over the Dallas Cowboys, and Tampa Bay Tom didn't really have to do anything. In this matchup up against the Saints, who we saw score points up against the Falcons, I know this is a tougher matchup, the Saints versus the Buccaneers defense, obviously, for famous Jameis Winston, but I do believe that both Tom Brady as well as famous Jameis Winston are worthy starters in this game for fantasy football. It was definitely annoying to see Taysom Hill come into the game and run the ball for the Saints under center, but it's not like Taysom Hill is going to steal away Jameis's job. There's going to be points in the game where I am sure Taysom Hill is going to show up and screw you over and make you pissed off if you started Jameis. But even with that happening last week, Jameis was still a fantastic quarterback for fantasy football up against the Bucs defense. This is far from an ideal matchup, not the perfect matchup, but he's definitely start worthy, as is Mr. Tampa Bay Tom Brady, even though Chris Godwin is now out for multiple games. Still don't get why the fuck the team rolled out Chris Godwin last week. Next up, we move to the Carolina Panthers at the New York Football Giants. Baker Mayfield last week in a revenge game versus the Cleveland Browns. I was so excited. If you guys know anything about me, if you watch my videos in the past, I'm a huge fan of the revenge game. I just love the revenge game narrative. I like the fact that Baker Mayfield could have absolutely torched the Cleveland Browns, but I think the game got to him. I think the game environment got to him, and he kind of just shit the bed out there. He did not play very good at all this week against the Giants, who played great up against the Titans and actually won that game, which was awesome to see for the Giants and Brian Daboll. They didn't win because Daniel Jones played all that great. They won because the defense woke up and because Saquon Barkley was just eating. He was out for blood in that game. He silenced the doubters. And again, I don't think you should overreact to week 1, but it was pretty clear to me that Saquon Barkley kind of hopped in that time machine, and he's the guy from a couple of years ago when it was like, holy shit, Saquon Barkley might be a top 5 running back or might be the best running back in the National Football League. With all that said, though, Daniel Jones is an interesting start in a 2-quarterback league because you know the upside is there with his rushing ability, with what he can do on his legs, and as well as the fact that maybe if Kadarius Toney knows the playbook, maybe things could go well for Daniel Jones. But right now, in your normal 1-quarterback league, there's really no reason to roll Daniel Jones out there. Definitely far from an ideal start. He's not one of those guys that's close to the fringe of me wanting to start him. He's definitely closer to the bottom of the rankings at the quarterback position. Baker Mayfield, I think he's going to look better than last week, but I really want to see it before I believe in it and want to roll him out. Next, we'll move to the New England Patriots at the Pittsburgh Steelers. In this game, I don't want to be starting either quarterback. The Steelers, early on, it was looking like a bloodbath up against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. The Bengals, offensively, could not do anything. The Steelers' defense was all over Joe Shiesty's ass. But even with that happening, even with all the picks that Joe Burrow threw, Mitch Trubisky could not do anything. Mitch Trubisky played like absolute dog shit. And I am someone who likes Mitch Trubisky. I think Mitch Trubisky got the short end of the stick by the Bears. But that matchup was bad for Trubisky. He did not look good at all. Am I completely out on Trubisky being a fantasy relevant play in certain matchups? No. But after what I saw in week number 1, you can't be starting him up against the Patriots. The Patriots defense didn't look good up against Miami. So maybe Trubisky can end up being good in this matchup. But also, there's a chance that the Dolphins offense is just so good that the Patriots defense actually isn't that bad, but they just couldn't handle what Mike McDaniel was sending at them. Mystic Mac Jones looked bad up against the Dolphins defense. Again, I think the Dolphins defense is an upper echelon defense in the NFL. The Steelers, even without TJ Watt, I think they're to be able to pressure Mac Jones. So I definitely do not believe he is worthy of a start this week. He's also, quote unquote, banged up. Next up, we move to the Atlanta Falcons at the LA Rams. I'm going to be firing out Matthew Stafford in this game. I know Matthew Stafford looked like goddamn Ray Charles in the pocket. He looked like he couldn't see anything. He played awful against the Bills. Aside from the time where he just force-fed the ball to Cooper Kupp, things were working for him when he did that. Up against the Falcons defense, though, it's a much different story compared to the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills defense, in my opinion, is one of the best defenses in the NFL. Von Miller kept getting to Matthew Stafford in a Von Miller revenge game, so I think Matthew Stafford is going to be a lot better this week up against the Falcons, and if he isn't, if he ends up shitting the bed here big time, then I'm going to start worrying about Matthew Stafford, and maybe that elbow injury is very serious for Stafford. For the Falcons, Marcus Mariota is close to being a start, but the issue here is that he's playing the Rams defense. The issue is while the Rams defense didn't look good up against Josh Allen, they are going to look good up against Marcus Mariota. He is great because of his rushing upside, and we saw him play quite well up against the Saints defense. That is pretty strong, but I just don't think the Saints compare to the Rams when it comes to defense, so I think Marcus Mariota won't have as good of a game, so he's a sit for me. But again, he's close to being a start, and in positive matchups and a better matchup than up against the Rams, he's definitely a guy I want in my lineup. Next up, we move to the Seattle Seahawks at the San Francisco 49ers, and I will continue to talk about this narrative on the fact that I believe that you should not take anything from the Bears versus the Niners game and really just throw that game out. Throw it out the fucking window because there was a torrential downpour. The ball slipping out of Lance's hand. They can barely throw the ball. There's 6 inches of rain. There is no reason to look at that game and be like, Trey Lance sucks absolute ass because he didn't do good in a game in a torrential fucking downpour. Makes no sense. You should not take anything from that. I understand Lance didn't look great, but now he's playing up against Seattle at home in San Francisco in a game where there's not going to be crazy weather and he's going to be actually able to do his thing. The reason why we like Trey Lance is because of that insane rushing upside he has week in and week out. We saw him try to rush a little bit up against the Bears. I think he'll be very successful up against the Seahawks, and I think the Seahawks are not as good as what they showed on Monday Night Football up against Russell Wilson. I think Trey Lance is going to have a day up against the Seahawks. Defense for the Seahawks, Geno Smith looked good. I'll admit it. I thought Geno Smith was dust. He looked good. But again, don't overreact to week 1. You saw Geno play decent. Come on. Don't start Geno Smith this week. You're just asking for a bad time up against a stout Niners defense. Next up, we got the Bengals at the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott gonna miss probably 4 to 8 weeks, but the team won't put him on fucking IR. They're saying, oh, he can come back before 4 weeks. What are you doing? He's not going to be back in 4 weeks. After that injury, it is insane to believe that he will be back in 4 weeks. Now, again, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins. So what do I know? But at the end of the day, everything that I have read is pointing towards the fact that it makes no sense to believe he'll be back in 4 weeks. Cooper Rush did play good up against the Minnesota Vikings, I believe, last year. But come on, do you really want to throw out Cooper Rush after the Bengals just shit the bed like that? The Bengals are going to be pissed off. The Bengals played probably the worst they're going to play all year. They're getting T. Higgins back for this game. It seems like T. Higgins is going to play yesterday. I didn't think Higgins was going to play. Now it seems more and more likely that he will. I think that Joe Shiesty is going to potentially put up the biggest point total at the quarterback position this week. The Cowboys defense, in my opinion, might be a little bit overrated, so I think Joe Shiesty is going to have a great day. The man just has so many weapons around him, and Cooper Rush is definitely best left on your bench. Next up, we move to the Houston Texans at the Denver Broncos, but before we break down this game, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. I'm pointing to them right now on the screen. They've been on the screen your entire video. Underdog Fantasy is best known for their Best Ball Mania 3 tournament, which occurred this summer. $2 million of first, $10 million total prize pool. Obviously, the season started, so that closed, but now they offer Best Ball Resurrection. $10 entry, $500,000 total prize pool, $100,000 to go to first place, and the contest closes prior to week 6 of the NFL season. If you like best ball, if you enjoy drafting, then you will love doing this. My favorite part about fantasy football is the draft. If a lot of your best ball lineups or a lot of your fantasy teams are not looking super hot, you can get back in right now on Underdog Fantasy. And the best part about Underdog Fantasy is all you got to do is draft. You don't have to worry about the waivers. You don't have to worry about trades. You don't even have to worry about setting your lineup because Underdog automatically gives you the best lineup at the end of the week. If you use promo code Stokastic, Stokastic, they will give you a $100 first match deposit bonus. So you deposit $100, they will give you an additional $100. So that's 10 entries into the Best Ball Resurrection for free. Make sure you guys do go ahead and check that out. Back to it, Texans at Broncos. Russell Wilson played great in that game up against Seattle. The offense didn't look great early on, but they started getting things rolling, and they were playing well. The issue was the fumbling on the goal line and the fact that Nathaniel Hackett is a fucking dumbass. Why they decided to kick a field goal from the parking lot instead of putting the ball into the quarterback's hands, who they pay $250 million plus to, makes no sense. Nathaniel Hackett last night said, oh, maybe guys, we should have went for it. No shit, pal. But Russell Wilson looked good up against the Texans defense. I know they played well up against the Colts, but the Broncos are a whole different goddamn breed than the Colts and Matt Ryan. So I think Russell Wilson has a day here up against the Texans. Davis, Money, Mills. I love Davis Mills. He's an interesting quarterback too in a 2-quarterback league, but up against the Broncos defense, I know they didn't look great against Geno. I think this whole team is going to bounce back. So Davis Mills is definitely best left on your bench. Next up, we move to the Arizona Cardinals at the, turn your volume down, the Las Vegas Raiders. Another interesting game. Two teams that took an L last week. The Raiders, Derek Carr didn't look the best. The Cardinals didn't look great either, though, up against Kansas City. I mean, they struggled immensely. Kyler looked like he spent all night playing fucking Warzone instead of studying the game plan because he looked awful, which we're not used to because normally the first couple weeks of the season, the Arizona Cardinals look unstoppable, and then once it starts getting a little bit cold out, then the Cardinals decline. They get a little flaccid as the season goes on, but they started off bad week 1. The Raiders didn't look amazing either. But even with that said, both of these quarterbacks are certainly upper echelon. Definitely Kyler Murray, right? There's a reason you started him, or there's a reason, I should say, that you drafted him in like the 4th, 5th, or 6th round in your fantasy football draft. That's because you're going to start him, and you definitely want to start him in a positive matchup, in a high-scoring matchup, potentially up against the Raiders. Derek Carr wasn't one of those upper echelon quarterbacks in the fantasy draft. He didn't look amazing last week, but I do think he bounces back here. And both of these guys certainly could be top 6 quarterbacks at the end of the week. Next up, we got the Chicago Bears at the Green Bay Packers. The owner of the Bears, Aaron Rodgers, is definitely a start here. I know it's hard to decipher which wide receiver you want to be starting in Green Bay. They have a lot of weapons. Christian Watson dropped a wide open pass that would have probably resulted in a touchdown, but I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be just fine. I know last week up against the Minnesota Vikings, they got sent directly to Pound Town. They got a one-way ticket to Pound Town. Same exact thing happened last year up against the Saints, so I'm not worried about Rodgers. I'm still rolling him out there up against the Bears. Justin Fields, again, there's nothing you could take from that game. Justin Fields could have thrown for 500 yards in the rain, ran for 200 yards, and I would not have cared at all because this is way different. There's not going to be this torrential downpour. There's not going to be a monsoon-like condition up against the Packers. Justin Fields, I think, has it in him to be very good. He might have that dog in him, as the kids say, but right now up against the Packers defense, he's going to ride the pine. Next up, we got the Dolphins at the Buffalo Bills. That last game was Sunday Night Football. Now we've got one of 2 Monday Night Football games because for some reason the NFL decided we wanted 2 Monday Night Football games this week. I thought normally that was week 1 that they do that, or normally it's week 1, 2 Sunday Night Football games. I don't know. I don't make the schedule. I didn't even know this was happening until we actually got to week 2. I don't know why. That never clicked in my brain that there was 2 week 2 games. I guess probably because they didn't talk about it. But Josh Allen is an obvious start. He's a must start. He was the quarterback 1 drafted in 99.999% of your drafts, going up against the Titans defense that looked pretty rough against the run up against the Giants. I think the Titans will bounce back and play decent here. The Bills are heavy favorites. They are biggest loser level favorites up against the Titans, so I expect Josh Allen to put on a masterclass of a game here up against the Titans. Ryan Tannehill didn't look awful. But if he doesn't start to wake up, I think there's a shot that Malik Willis plays this year. Earlier on the offseason, if you asked me just before week 1, I would have told you, no fucking way Malik Willis is going to play. But if Tannehill doesn't start to step up, then I'm getting worried for him. Definitely not starting him here. I think he's a fine quarterback, but up against the Bills, no bueno. Minnesota Vikings at the Philadelphia Eagles. Kirk Cousins looked outstanding up against the Packers. Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson were amazing. The other wide receivers in Minnesota, though, the other players, I guess, besides Jefferson and Kirk, Irv Smith, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, and I'm trying to make like a buzzer noise. I guess it doesn't come off like that. I probably sound like a dying fucking bird. Did I mention Irv Smith? He was a dud as well. Irv Smith, I think, put up a goose egg. That man screwed over my DFS lineup that I thought was so good. Oh, man, what could have been? But this week, I expect the other offensive players to be involved. Even if they're not, though, this game could be pretty high scoring. And Kirk, you like that. Cousins could be in for a huge performance, even if he just keeps throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson, because the guy is always open. Speaking of always open, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Dillon. Beautiful. Chef's kiss, magnifique. Jalen Hurts got a lot of rushing upside. Clearly, they want to throw the ball to A.J. Brown. Things work perfectly when you throw the ball to an excellent wide receiver. Not surprising. Up against the Vikings defense. The Vikings defense looked really good last week, but I think that was more of just the Packers offense looking bad. The Packers offense couldn't get it up. They were in dire need of some Blue Chew. Not a sponsor of today's video, so Viagra we'll just go with. Also not a sponsor of today's video. Jalen Hurts should be just fine in this matchup. I like Jalen Hurts a ton. I definitely like Hurts more than Cousins because of the rushing upsides. Thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you ended up enjoying, please make sure you hit that like button as well as that subscribe button down below. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. And if you got any questions, make sure you leave them down below in the comment section. I love you guys all so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.